Hi everyone. Today we are talking about goals and how to help clients make changes. So first of all, goals. Well, the first thing we need to consider are goals important? Well, the most important thing is that we don't rush into getting a client to make a goal, because that can get in the way of actually hearing their story and building a relationship with them and understanding where they're coming from. So some of you have experienced the desire to rush the process and to get the client to think about what strategies they could take or what things they could change in their lives before you've got the full story or before you've built that therapeutic relationship. So it's important that we've done the relationship building and the assessment and the information gathering first before we get to helping someone set some goals. And what should these goals be? And that's another consideration. So they should be meaningful to the client. There's no point in setting goals that make no sense or hold no value for the client, because what will happen is they won't adhere to those. So they will just not be important to the client. So it needs to be coming from the client and not from us. So we have to work with the client on what they want to change in their lives, rather than what we think they should be changing in their lives. And that's a tricky one. And also, who benefits from setting or having goals? So sometimes when you're feeling like you don't know what to say or where to go with a session, you can find yourself rushing towards getting someone to set goals. And so that's usually a way of managing your own anxieties when you're trying to help someone. But there are really great benefits to clients in setting goals. So the major benefit of setting goals clinically is that it helps you tailor how you're going to work with someone based on what they want to change or how they want to improve. It also helps you understand the client's expectations, so what they are expecting to get out of the process, and can help you dispel some myths. So perhaps a client will come in and they'll be expecting to feel better within 2 weeks, and they've been feeling the way they're feeling for 4 years. And so in that case, we want to be talking to them about how it could be a little bit of a process to working on feeling better. So understanding the client's goals is really important in helping us dispel any kind of myths or unrealistic expectations, but also planning a way forward. It provides some kind of structure and direction to a session or to a series of sessions. So say, for example, someone comes in and they're telling you a story and there's lots of bits to the story and you're just not quite sure where to go with the story. A really good thing to ask the client is, so you've discussed, some financial issues and some issues with your partner and some issues with your children and some issues at work. And a lot of these seem to be troubling you. Which one do you think you want to work on first? So that gives you a sense of what's the most difficult problem for the client, so you can focus on that, because you might think the most difficult problem is maybe the work problem, but in fact for them it's their problem with their partner. So we need to understand the relative importance of the different problems and where people want to go with that. So again, it helps you focus on specific areas that the client wants to work on. Now this is more in terms of a clinical counselling role. It helps you target certain interventions, but there are other interventions that I will introduce you to in a couple of weeks that you can use to help people manage their feelings and their thoughts, that can be really useful. And it's interesting that, you know, there's research that suggests that people who are working towards personal goals generally have a higher well-being. So we are all kind of future directed, and we have a need to be working towards something. And if you're not working towards something, or you see nothing that can be gained in the future, that, you know, that can create a real hopelessness. So so helping someone to discover or to articulate what they want to work on can be really a useful thing. So what kind of goals might a client make in a counselling setting? Well, first of all, it might be about crisis management. So I want to, you know, not feel like this right now, in which case you want to get the relevant supports in place, maybe make a referral, make sure the person's safe and that kind of thing. Development of coping strategies. So that might be learning how to handle their thoughts and feelings, and developing strategies around anger management, for example, or around anxiety. Long-term pattern change. So sometimes people have patterns that they repeat over and over again. So for example, in relationships, they can be afraid of intimacy, or they can be very hot-headed. And so it's about changing a pattern that's developed over time that's really not helping them achieve their goals. Symptom reduction, so that can be, you know, reducing anger or reducing anxiety, or helping concentrate, or reducing procrastination, those kinds of things. Self-examination, so that's understanding oneself a bit better, understanding why certain things bother you, why you think and feel this, you know, the way that you do, and reflecting on experiences that you've been through that may contribute to that. And sometimes goals can be about, well, I've made a big change in my life, I've quit drinking, and I want to keep that going. So that's, you know, that's my goal. Or I want to, you know, I want to continue with a work-life balance, and how am I going to achieve that over the long term? So things to consider when setting goals. So what's a realistic amount of change? So when we think about someone who wants to set a goal around feeling better, for example, we've got to think about their resources that they have at their disposal. So how much social support do they have, and do we need to increase that for them to meet their goals? And how long have they been feeling or experiencing this problem? And because that will indicate how long sometimes it can take to address the problem. So what's realistic? We don't want to have a client expect to overhaul their entire life in a short period of time, because it's not realistic. We need to make small changes that it can be kept up over time. Does everything need to be addressed at once? So often we, you know, like I said before, we will hear these stories and there's lots going on, and we think, oh gosh, you know, there's so much to attack right here. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we just need to work in one area that's really bothering the client. Are there significant barriers that serve as, you know, that stand in the way to progress or to achieving the goal? So, for example, we wouldn't want to be working with someone on achieving employment if they haven't already achieved secure accommodation. So that would serve as a real barrier to someone getting work if they don't have somewhere safe and secure to stay. And you know, there's other barriers like you know, economic barriers. So if someone doesn't have the money to get the bus to a job interview, that would serve as a barrier as well. Other barriers could be things like drug and alcohol use, or an untreated mental health issue. So if someone's looking at changing their drug and alcohol use, we also need to look at any underlying mental health issues that are going on for them, because often drug and alcohol use comes about as a way of coping with mental health problems. It's really important that you're both in agreement on the goals. So we don't want to be driving this goal setting. We want to be helping the client clarify what they want to achieve, so it's meaningful for them. And is the client ready for change? And that's a really important one. And I'll show you how to figure that out. But, you know, if we're working with someone who doesn't want to change, then, you know, we could talk to we're blue in the face, and, you know, it could make no difference whatsoever. So if someone doesn't want to do something, so say, for example, I said, I want to stop eating chocolate. Well, I've got no interest whatsoever in doing that. And so I'm not going to follow through on that goal. So it needs to be coming from, you know, the client, and whether they're seeing a problem with their behavior. So some clients don't have a clear idea of their goals, and our job is to help them clarify where they want their life to be going. What do they want to achieve in life? Where do they want to be in 5 years' time? What's not working for them right now? So asking those really important open questions that can help them explore those areas can help you help a client clarify their goals. Sometimes a client won't have any goals, and that often happens when they are mandated or kind of forced into getting treatment. So for example, you know, a child has come to talk to you because their parent has told them they have to, or the principal has told them they have to, or, you know, and it's not by their choice. And so that usually gets in the way of someone coming up with their own goals. And so we need to explore, first of all, what it's like to be told that they have to talk to someone. So what's that like? To be kind of, you know, to be in this situation with someone that they don't know very well, or maybe they do know very well, to talk about how they're feeling. So that's the first step. And then start to talk to them about, you know, what about their life are they satisfied with? What's working well for them? And what are they dissatisfied with? What's important to them? What are their values? Where these might have come from. So do they value, for example, having strong connections with people in the community, with their family, with their friends? Or do they value getting through school and getting a job? So exploring those values are really important to be able to help them voice their goals. They might have the implicit goals, like to stay the same, because possibly staying the same has some kind of payoff. So we need to unpack that a little bit to understand, you know, what's in it for the client to not make any changes. Are there any downsides that they haven't thought about? So these tentative open questions can help a client explore where they want to be working on, and what's this experience like to be asked to work on something, you know, to start with. And that's where your empathy and your relationship building skills are really important. So the client doesn't feel like they're getting forced into anything. They feel heard, they feel understood, and they feel like you're not trying to push them into anything. Sometimes a client will have unrealistic goals. So for example, I never want to be sad again. And, you know, we know that sadness has an important function for everyone, and it's important that we have the full experience of the range of emotions that humans can experience. And so this is an example of an unrealistic or unattainable goal. So first of all, you want to explore the reasons behind that goal and the experiences behind the decision never to be sad. So what is it about sadness that they really don't want to be experiencing? Is it the response they're getting from other people, or is it the experience internally? Explore the dilemmas the client faces when they're trying to live a life without sadness. So maybe they're trying to get rid of their sadness by taking risks, you know, or maybe they are trying to get rid of their sadness by always being around other people and, you know, feeling exhausted as a result. Or maybe they're trying to deal with their sadness with substances, or, you know, being addicted to work or something like that. So what are the things that come up for them in this, you know, striving to have a life without sadness? A bit of psychoeducation is really useful in terms of sometimes, you know, people think that sadness is a bad thing, but we all experience these emotions for a very good reason, because they serve as a guide for us of how things are affecting us. So just giving that little snippet of information of actually sadness could be quite useful. We don't want to get rid of it. Convey information about possible consequences of denying sadness. So sometimes when we push down feelings for a long period of time, they can come up in different ways. So for example, you know, pushing down feelings of sadness can sometimes result in anxiety, you know, coming up in certain situations. So it is important that we are able to experience our full experience of emotions. Convey the view that the goal is unrealistic. So it's okay to say, look, you know, I understand that you don't want to feel sad, but I'm not sure that that's realistic, because everybody feels sad at different points. And, you know, maybe we could look at what you do when you feel sad and whether there's any ways around those things. So could we change what you're doing when you're feeling sad? So I'm sure you've all seen this before, but it's just a nice little quick reminder that when we're helping someone set goals, we need them to be really, really specific. So for example, a lot of people make a goal usually around January that says, I want to be fitter. Well, what does fitter actually mean? For me, it might be something completely different to you. So sometimes that might mean I want to be able to run 100 meters without feeling like I'm going to die. So that could be, you know, a specific goal. And so how would you measure that you've achieved that goal? So how would you know that you're fitter? Well, you know, if you're going to set a more specific goal, it could be that you can run 100 meters without feeling like you're going to die. Is it achievable? So can you achieve it in a certain amount of time? And based on your own health and your own, you know, background and what you've been experiencing in the last little while, and the other barriers you might face, you know, so maybe you've got a bad knee or something like that. And maybe you've got a lot of uni work to complete and that kind of thing. So think about, is it achievable? Is it realistic? And set a date that you want to achieve that goal. So it can't be open-ended, otherwise we're not working towards something. So by the 1st of November, I want to be able to run 100 meters. All right, so on to change. It's quite a fascinating topic and something that a lot of people misunderstand when we're talking about helping people change or people changing their behaviour. And this information is based on the Stages of Change model, which was developed in the area of addiction counselling. And it's really useful for lots of different things like changing eating behaviours or exercise behaviours, or anything really. And one of the major points that this model makes is that people's readiness to change is not constant. So my desire to start running 100 meters doesn't stay the same. So sometimes there's more desire to make a change, and sometimes there's less desire to make a change. People can move through this cycle of wanting to change and then not wanting to change a number of times, and can continue to learn what works for them. Understanding where someone's at in terms of their readiness for change can help us tailor or match how we respond to the client, and that's really useful. So this is the stages of change model, and it goes from, this is what they call a happy user. So someone who's in the stage of pre-contemplation, where they're not thinking about making a change at all. They're happy using chocolate or using, substances, and they wouldn't consider making a change. And then they go around in the cycle where they start to think about it, they start to prepare for it, they start to make action, and then they make the change. Whoops. Sorry about that. They make the change and then they maintain the change over time. And we need to figure out where someone is on this cycle in order to respond to them appropriately. So I'm not going to show this right now, but you can have a look at this video, and it shows an example of setting goals with someone using this framework. So understanding where someone's at in terms of wanting to make a change and helping them set those goals. So it's a really useful video to watch. We've already looked at that. So one of the important indicators of whether someone's ready to make a change or not is using the readiness ruler. So this is a really simple technique, and it addresses two important things in change behavior. One of them is, how important is it to someone to make the change? And secondly, how confident do you feel about making the change? And the reason why using these scales is really helpful is because if someone feels like they are very confident that they can make a change, but it's just not that important to them, then we know that what we need to do is help someone explore how their life is working for them right now, and whether there's anything in their behavior or in their life that's that is not helping them meet their goals. So we need to work on that importance area. If someone feels like, yes, it's really important to me to make a change, I know that smoking, for example, is really unhealthy and I know it's affecting my health, but I feel like I just can't stop, and I've tried before and I can't stop. So we need to help them develop that confidence and get the resources around them to build the confidence. So that's why the readiness ruler is really useful. So pre-contemplation. So that's where, someone might say, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I don't see the problem. I can see what you're saying about smoking, but I don't see it affecting me. So they can't see the effect of the behavior on their own health or their own life at the moment. Or if they can, the payoffs of that behavior are higher than the negatives. So that's usually what happens in pre-contemplation, where they can see that, yeah, but smoking relaxes me and it gives me something to do with my hands, and it's a social thing at work, and so the good parts outweigh the bad parts. So someone in pre-contemplation is not thinking about making a change. So they don't see the issue, isn't convinced there's a reason to change, Often they'll come to you to talk about it because someone else has told them to do so. So it's always our job to ask the person, how do you feel about it? Not your partner or your child or your principal or whatever. How do you feel about it? So when we're working with pre-contemplators, so pre-contemplators generally would have a low importance on the importance readiness ruler. We need to help them develop reasons. Does anything about the issue actually cause you problems or lessen your quality of life? Or if things stay exactly the same, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So it's really important not to ask these questions in a judgmental way. What we're trying to do is get the person to think about the problem and whether it's actually working for them or not. We want to validate that they are not ready to make a change, that they're happy enough with the behaviour right now. We also want to tell them that, you know, or to get them to think about if they didn't have the behavior or the addiction or whatever it is, could it be better? Could life be better? What could be better if you weren't drinking, or what could be better if you weren't, you know, gambling or something like that? So get them to think about life without the problem and what that would be like. The most important thing is that when we let them know we're not forcing them to make a change. So this is obviously separate to any disciplinary action that happens with a child at school. But in terms of behaviour change or changing potentially health impacting behaviours, we want to tell someone that we're not going to preach them. They are going to be the one to decide when they're ready to give up. And you hear that they're not ready, but you know, when you are ready, I'm here to talk. So you always want to leave the door open, but also validating that they're not ready to change right now. So contemplation is when someone starts to see a problem in a behaviour. They're not quite ready to make a change, but they see the problems. So they're becoming aware that a problem exists. They might be considering a change but haven't made a commitment yet. And they might be thinking about the bad things about the problem as well as the good things. So a really good strategy to use with contemplators who can see the problem but are not ready to make a change is about weighing up the pros and cons. So that's a really simple technique to get them to it's called a decisional balance sheet, but pros and cons is just as good. Get them to think about, so what are the bad things, or you know, what are the not so good things about the behavior or drinking, or about you know, graffiti or whatever it is they're doing. What are the not so good things? And what are the good things? So we need to validate the good things, because if they didn't have any good things, they wouldn't be doing the behavior. So we need to validate that as well as the bad things. So help them understand where they're sitting in terms of the good things and the not so good things. And that will help them understand when things are tipping more towards things are not so good right now. So we want to say that we hear them, that they're, you know, thinking about it, but they're not ready to take action right now. So we want them to let them know, we want to let them know that we're not going to force them into action right now. We're not going to preach to them, and they'll be the one to decide when they're ready to deal with the problem. We also want to explore what are some of the downsides of changing. So what are they afraid of? What might they lose? And what are the upsides? So we want to keep the door open again to continue talking about those questions about the downsides, what they would lose. Would they lose particular connections to people if they change their behaviour? Or would they gain respect or, more friendships if they were to give it up? So it's about encouraging that self-exploration, but not forcing the issue. So after talking about this and doing the exercise, if you feel you would like to make some changes, the next step won't be jumping into action. We can begin with some preparation work. So if someone is thinking about making a change, they're not quite sure if they can, we want to think about how can we prepare for this before we actually move to action. Because if you give someone the idea that you're going to force this change or make them go straight to the action stage, then they probably won't come back and talk to you ever again because it'll be too scary. So these are some questions. They're nice open questions that you can ask in this contemplation stage. Preparation. So this is where someone has moved along a little bit. They've realized that there's more not so good things than there are good things, and they're ready to make a change. So a person's getting ready to change as the cons outweigh the pros. They might start making big plans for a lifestyle change. And we need to avoid encouraging people to overhaul their whole life because that's not sustainable. So we want to encourage small but sustainable changes. So for example, the idea that people who drink too much can only ever give up completely in order to address their problem, and that's not necessarily true. So sometimes a change in behaviour can be about reduction rather than extinction of a behaviour. So we're not looking at all or nothing. We want to look at what's sustainable, what's doable, what fits into their lifestyle and all that kind of thing. So these are some questions we can ask in this stage. So praising the decision. It's great that you feel good about dealing with the problem, doing something important to improve your quality of life. Prioritize opportunities for change. So looking at the negative aspects of what's happening, what do you think would be the first thing you'd like to see change or improve? Identify problem solving. Have you ever attempted to deal with the problem? What was helpful? What kind of problems would you expect in making those changes now? So figuring out if they've tried before to make a change and what kind of things did they come across that made it difficult for them can help you plan. Encourage small initial steps. So our initial goal is to try to do this instead of that 6 times next week or this week. So instead of smoking, I'm going to go for a walk around the block 6 times this week. That's my goal. Assist to identify support. So which family members could support you and how could they support you? It's also important to help them identify, certain friends or family members who don't help. So there might be some people who find it difficult to see their family member or friend change and kind of try to drag them back into their usual behaviour because it can be confronting, for some people when they see someone changing. So we need to identify people who are supportive of the change. Action. So this is when things really start happening. So this is where they make the change, they start to develop problem solving and goal setting skills to cope. So how can they cope when they feel like they want to use? How can they cope when they feel like they want to shop? What could they do instead? help develop relapse prevention skills. So recognizing when I walk past, you know, so maybe someone who's addicted to shopping, when I walk past Myers, I feel triggered, and so I need to avoid that shopping centre. Coping with pressures. So how can they cope with having a bad day without falling back into the old behaviour? So what could they do instead? Could they call a friend? Could they go, you know, hang out with someone? Could they go for a walk? That kind of thing. Encourage the use of achievable alternatives. So that's, you know, doing things that are pleasurable but not actually the undesirable behaviour. And distract, delay, decatastrophize, and de-stress. So that's the 4 Ds that we use in addiction counselling. And so if someone feels the urge to use or to consume or to do something that they don't want to do, we ask them to find something to distract themselves. So go for a drive, or watch a TV show, or ring a friend to distract yourself. Delay acting on it, because usually the urge to use or to do whatever you want to do goes up like this, and then it goes down. So we're trying to get people to kind of surf the urge, like, so distract, delay acting on it, and then usually starts to go down. Decatastrophize, so dealing with some of the thoughts that come up when you want to use or act on the behavior. And de-stress, so how can you find ways to soothe yourself when you're feeling distressed for whatever reason? So whether it's talking through it or journaling, or, you know, whatever stress management techniques work for you. So we want to break down goal setting into long-term goals. I want to be completely free of marijuana use in 12 months. In the first week, I'm going to have only 1 joint a day. This is someone who maybe has 4 a day. In the second week, I'm going to have 1 every second day. In the third week, I'm going to have 1, but I'm going to fill half of it with tobacco. That's something that people do when they're trying to give up marijuana. So breaking down goals into achievable chunks so it doesn't seem so big. And as you know, when you're looking at maybe an assignment that you have to do for uni, and you look at it and you see, you know, the word count is 3,000 words and there's all these areas that you need to cover, and you might be like, oh God, I can't do this. But if you break it down, you start to look at different sections and start to work on small sections at a time, you start to see that I can actually do this. I can just take it a bit by bit. So it's about breaking down a big, scary task to small chunks. Maintenance is when someone's made a change and they want to keep it going. So usually we say that people have they've reached this maintenance stage when they have practiced a less harmful lifestyle until it becomes automatic. So they're not thinking about it all the time. So 6 months or more. So, you know, in this stage, we want to reinforce why they changed and help them notice the positives in their life. We want to emphasize the need for support and keeping connected to people around them, and to assist them in identifying when they might be triggered to change or go back to that initial behavior, and what they can do about it. So, you know, the 4 Ds are useful: stress management, counselling, all that kind of thing. And relapse. So relapse is misunderstood in that it's seen as losing everything you've achieved, but usually it's a common occurrence in the cycle of change. So sometimes someone will have a lapse, so maybe they will you know, go on a shopping spree when they've been trying to stop a shopping addiction, for example, and you could see that as a lapse. But if they're doing it every day or multiple times a week, spending all their money, then you might want to call that a relapse. So we need to re-emphasize that having a setback is all part of learning how to manage our triggers, how to manage ourselves and our stress. Really validate the client, because they can be full of shame and self-loathing. Like, why do I have this problem? Why can't I get over this? I'm useless. All this kind of thing can go through their heads. You know, let people know that often people pass through relapse several times before making a real lasting change, and lots of research can back that up. And often in the action stage, coping skills are not always positive. So, you know, you might find that someone replaces one drug for another, or maybe they replace workaholism with an exercise addiction, or, you know, something like that. So you can perhaps talk about, you know, other behaviours that might be more supportive in their long-term goal. So that is a snapshot of making changes and how to set goals with clients. Obviously, it depends on what kind of work you're going to be doing and which population you're going to be using, but the most important thing is to remember that understanding where someone's at in terms of the cycle of change can help us respond to them. There's nothing worse than feeling like someone's pushing you along before you're ready. So we need to work with someone where they're at, help them understand what's not working for them, help them visualize how their life could be better for themselves. All the time working with the client's values, the client's goals, the client's hopes for their own life, not our own life, because we've got different values and goals and ideas of what's normal and what's healthy and all that kind of thing. So hopefully you found that helpful, and you can put it into practice at some stage.